Hello, bonjour et bienvenue. Herzlich willkommen. Hola et buenos dias. Buongiorno, bon dia, and hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International. And I just welcomed you in 7 different languages because Spiritual Awakenings International is truly an international network. We are just delighted that since we launched 9 months ago, we have grown to include subscribers in 55 countries around the world on every continent except Antarctica. We're still waiting for those penguins. And we're up to over around 1,300 subscribers. We are just delighted at the interest and enthusiasm of Spiritual Awakenings International. So welcome everyone from around the world. And in that spirit, if you could just put into the chat box where you are zooming in from. I happen to be zooming in from Toronto, Canada, and Robert Bear is zooming in from Oregon in the USA. I know we have some international people here with us today from Brazil, possibly from England. So please enter into the chat box where it is you're zooming in from so we know where you're all from. And I'd like to now turn it over to the Vice President of Spiritual Awakenings International, Robert Bear, who's going to be giving some opening remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Cason. I am Robert Bear. I'm actually zooming in from South Beach, Oregon, right on the Oregon coast. And I'd like to welcome everybody also. Spiritual Awakenings International is an international organization, and it's worldwide. And we are, like Dr. Cason said, we're like a bullet train. We're just growing by leaps and bounds. A couple of notables. I'd like to take a few moments to introduce our board and advisory board members. Of course, Dr. Cason is president. Linda Truax is our secretary, and she'll be handling the question and answer segment of this presentation. Nicole Gruel, Diane Willis, Bonnie Greenwell, John Spar, who's here, and Judith Miller and Tamara Calder Richardson. We've got a great advisory board and board itself. We also have what's called a Circle of Honor, where we have actually honored those people that have been pioneers in the spiritual awakenings field. We are very honored to have Peter Fenwick here listening in on this broadcast from Europe. Thank you so much, Dr. Fenwick. And the format of the meeting, everything is muted, everything but the speaker. The question and answer period will be held at the end of the presentation. Linda Truax, our secretary, will handle that, like I said before. I want to thank John Spar and Chuck Rader and the South Bay Ions for co-sponsoring this event. It's wonderful to have you guys involved in this. We are very pleased. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Cason. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Robert. So it is my great pleasure today to introduce our speaker, Reynario Hernandez, often known as Ray. Reynario Hernandez is the director of the CCRI, which is the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, which is an academic research institute whose mission is to look at the relationship between consciousness and the contact with non-human intelligences via many, what he calls contact modalities. So this would include many types of STEs, near-death experiences, UFO encounters, UAP, channeling, mediumship, remote viewing, and more. He was previously one of the 4 co-founders of the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, which was a 501c3 academic research institute that just finished a 5-year comprehensive research study on UFO contact experiencers. In fact, he's a world-renowned UFO expert, one of 3 co-editors of this historic 820-page book entitled Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and the Contact with Non-Human Intelligence, which was based on the Freeze 5-year study on UFO experiencers. He's also been published in many peer-reviewed journals and academic journals. And he is the co-editor of a new 3-volume book that is going to be coming out, A Greater Reality, The New Paradigm of Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. So I'm absolutely delighted that Rayanero Hernandez is going to be our speaker today. And I'd like to say on a personal note, about a week ago when Ray and I were speaking, he told me about his own personal spiritual awakening experiences that turned him from an atheist into a spiritual seeker. And I would invite you, Ray, to please start your presentation today. Tell us a little bit about your own STEs that caused your own spiritual awakening. So, Rayanero Hernandez.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. Before 2012, I had zero interest in these topics. I had attended Cornell University for a master's. I had gone to the University of California, Berkeley for a PhD. For over 20 years, I've been working as an IRS estate tax attorney, handling litigation for cases involving millionaires and billionaires, and the topic of the paranormal and the contact modalities was the last thing on my mind. And then in 2012, my wife and I had an encounter, an experience, I should say, with what I now call an energy being in our living room that totally healed our paralyzed dog, who we were going to be euthanizing later that afternoon. And then it began a series of, for the next 4 years, of almost nonstop paranormal experiences. And what I told Yvonne was how this intelligence that I'm interacting with gave me spirituality. And it involved a series of NDE related type of experiences, which lasted over 4 months. And it started with me calling down a huge, gigantic UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, which was witnessed by my then 10-year-old daughter and 3 adult friends. And and I was interacting with it telepathically for over an hour. And then the very next day, I saw my very first video on NDEs. And I was completely overwhelmed by that video. And I went to Amazon and I ordered 20 books on NDEs. And then I have to finish most of them. I ordered 20 more. And that went on for over 4 months. It started off 4 hours a day. And then towards the very end of those 4 months, it was literally 18 hours a day. I wasn't doing any of my IRS tax work. I didn't care about my family. I didn't care about anything else except finishing the next NDE book. And then let me start this by saying, what would be the statistical probabilities of the very first 3 people you ever mentioned NDEs to? This would be on a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday. For all of these 3 people to then tell you that they also had an NDE. And so that's beyond statistical probabilities there. But that's what happened to me. The first one on Friday was with my daughter's pediatrician. The second one was this man at church in a group social dinner. And then the last was my own father. And his NDE was the most profound NDE experience I've ever read from any of those hundreds of books on NDEs. And it was after I went home that evening, after my father told me of his NDE. Remember, this is 3 days in a row, the very first 3 people I ever mentioned NDEs to. And on my way home, I spoke to God for the first time, you know, who I consider God, our universal creator, and to the beings who I consider modern angels that were interacting with me. And I thank them for, in a 4-month period, totally transforming me from a rational materialist atheist into someone that doesn't have a belief, but a knowingness that I'm an eternal spiritual being. And so that was the story I shared with Yvonne. And there are literally hundreds of other types of experiences similar to this that that I had during that 5-year period. And so now I want to tell you now of how these experiences triggered me to begin to academically research initially the UFO contact phenomenon, but now all of the contact modalities. And I'll explain what those are, and to do it academically with a very large team of retired PhD academics. So let me begin my explanation and my story. So let me share my screen, and okay, let's start from the very beginning. Okay, I hope everyone can see that screen.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. The organization that I'm affiliated with now is titled Consciousness and Contact Research Institute, CCRI. It's a 501c3, which is an academic research not-for-profit. My email is info@experiencer.org. Please write that down. Send me an email and I will send you information about our previous research study. I will send you chapters from our previous book that Yvonne alluded to, and then I'll send you information about our current academic research study. Our website is still currently being developed. CCRI is an academic research institute whose focus is on researching what is consciousness, what is the nature of our reality, by undertaking cross-comparative research on individuals that are having various types of contact with non-human intelligence via what we are calling the contact modalities. To your right, you will see the front cover of our new book. It's going to be not 3 volumes, but 4 volumes. And it's titled A Greater Reality, The New Paradigm of Consciousness, the Paranormal and the Contact Modalities. And there's 4 co-editors. All the 4 co-editors are retired academic professors. You don't see there Dr. Michael Grosso, who worked very closely with Dr. Kenneth Ring for many years, and actually was quoted verbatim in Dr. Ring's book, The Omega Project, which I'm going to be talking about in a couple of minutes. We have 15 PhD academics and we have 5 medical doctors on our board and on our research committee. There are also 10 lay researchers that are working with us. And we, over the last 2 years, we've been developing a methodology to undertake a 5-year academic research study on the major experiencers of the contact modalities via quantitative and qualitative surveys to be followed by structured interviews. CCRI hypothesizes that we are interacting with non-human intelligence via various paranormal modalities, and that all of these contact modalities might be derived from one source and might be one phenomenon. And currently, the fields of NDEs, OBEs, UFOs, hallucinogenic journeys, et cetera, they don't view this as one phenomenon. They view it as separate and distinct phenomena and not as one phenomenon. CCRI hypothesizes that consciousness is what unifies the contact modalities, and that consciousness is primary and not our material reality. In addition, the majority of our academic researchers also hypothesize that we are living within what is commonly called a virtual reality, and that this might explain why all of the contact modalities are interrelated. This view of reality is considered a post-materialist view of reality. As I alluded to earlier, the majority of researchers of the contact modalities, i.e. UFOs, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, even hallucinogenic studies that are being done by Johns Hopkins University and various other medical schools, they're still taking a materialist perspective to this phenomenon. Materialism, let's define it. The idea that matter is the only reality and the belief system that the mind is nothing but the physical activity of the brain, and that our thoughts cannot have any effect upon our brains and bodies, our actions, and the physical world. However, research on quantum physics, the psi phenomenon, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, mediumship, hallucinogens, and now our free UAP experiencer research study supports the hypothesis that the mind can exist separate from the brain, and that consciousness is the key to be able to understand it. CCRI wants to compare the UAP UFO contact experiencer research data from its free experiencer research study with individuals that have had other types of paranormal contact experiences with non-human intelligence via what we're calling the contact modalities. Now let's define what are the contact modalities. Contact modalities are unidentified area phenomenon contact experiences, commonly called UFO contact, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, spirit and ghost communications, remote viewing, hallucinogenic contact, for example, people that have used DMT, ayahuasca, psilocybin, LSD, etc., mediumship, channeling, and other types of human communication with non-human intelligence and its related paranormal experiences. So we want to be able to do a comparative contrast analysis of all of these individuals. This is sort of like a graphic display of what we're trying to do. We're arguing that all of these experiences that you see there surrounding consciousness, that it's all interrelated. And again, this is our future website, experiencer.org, which is currently being developed. George Knapp, many of you know who he is. He has a radio show, Coast to Coast, that's been running now for over 30 years. He's extremely well known, and he talks about all of the contact modalities. I recently interviewed George Knapp. I'm not going to play the full recording, but I have excerpts from that recording. And he basically said that the lessons that all of these paranormal phenomena, the contact modalities, are interrelated. He said flying saucers might not be crafts from other worlds. These visitors might not be from another planet. Flying saucers, which is a materialist ufology perspective, is not the answer to these bigger questions. You need to have a much more broader understanding of the nature of our reality. That reality is far more complex than we can imagine. He says it makes UFOs, Roswell, and UFO crashes look very small. Dr. John Alexander. John Alexander, for many of you that do not know who he is, he was the second president of IONS, the International Association of Near-Death Studies. His PhD dissertation was on the afterlife and on NDEs. And he stated, to understand the UFO phenomenon, we need to look at it via a wider context of the contact modalities. UFOs, NDEs, OBEs, remote viewing, shamanism, poltergeist, spirits, etc. And not as each of these as separate phenomena. They are not separate phenomena. One of the problems is that we tend to stovepipe each phenomenon as a single discipline instead of viewing it via an interdisciplinary approach. He says that somehow all of these phenomenon are connected. Also, by the way, John is, for many years, has been the president of the International Remote Viewers Association. And for many that do not know his background, he was also one of the pioneers in the field of remote viewing as well. Now, cross-comparative research. How can we compare UAP-related contact experiences to NDE, OBE, and other types of experiencers? When there was no statistical data on UFO, UAP contact experiencers. We had literally zero data on that, on UFO studies, but yet we had lots of data on, for example, NDEs. Thus, there was a need for a formal, comprehensive, multinational, multi-language academic research on the UFO contact experience. The book that you see there to the right, Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence, was published 2 years ago. It was a project, a collaboration of more than 15 PhD academic professors. And it was the world's first comprehensive, multi-language, statistical academic research study on UAP related contact experiencers. From beginning to end, the research lasted 5 years. Which resulted in the publication of that 820-page book. The following data presentation is based solely from our academic research study. To qualify to take our survey, you needed to, first of all, have seen a UFO, and secondly, have had some type of contact experience with a non-human intelligence. One of the full co-founders of our organization is the late Dr. Edgar Mitchell. Dr. Edgar Mitchell not only was the sixth man to walk on the moon, he was also the founder of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, which, in my opinion, is the world's leading academic research institute on the psi phenomenon. And he started that in 1972. The other co-founder was Dr. Rudy Shields. Rudy Shields is an emeritus professor of astrophysics at Harvard University. So we're not talking about some flimsy people here. We're talking two of the top scholars that have been researching the topic of consciousness for more than 30 years. The other individual is Mary Rodwell, who has been researching UFO contact experiencers for over 35 years. And so we needed both the academics and the people with their boots on the ground, and Mary was just one of them, to be able to begin to properly begin to understand how can we study these experiencers. And the fourth co-founder was myself. Dr. John Climo, a retired professor of psychology for over 45 years. He was the co-chair of the research committee and research study. The other co-chair was Dr. Bob Davis, and he also was a retired professor of neuroscience at the State University of New York. And he published several years ago a book titled Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. So we're talking heavyweights, and these are just some of the leading researchers in our group, but there were many others. We developed two quantitative surveys comprised of 600 quantitative questions, one open-ended survey, a qualitative instrument comprised of 70 open-ended questions. It took us 3 years to administer that survey. We used only responses from individuals that had conscious memory and not memory from hypnotic regressions, from lucid dreams, from channeling, etc. Because if we would have allowed that, we would have had major problems with that. We administered the survey in multiple languages, in English, Spanish, French, German, Slovak, and we're still developing the Chinese survey. What follows is just the responses for the English language survey as of the data of June 1st, 2018, when we cut off the data collection. At that point, we had 4,145 individuals that responded to our initial phase 1 survey from over 125 countries. For phase 2, we had almost 2,300 individuals. And for phase 3, which is our qualitative instrument, we had 1,456 individuals. And there we received more than 10,000 pages of written responses to the 70 open-ended questions. So this was a huge undertaking to try to review that data. We had 4 major findings. First major findings that unlike what ufology is circulating, the overwhelming experiences from these individuals was positive. Secondly, there was a positive transformation of the individual, of the experiencer. And that was the same finding as Dr. Kenneth Ring, and I'll speak to that in a second. Number 3, these experiences were primarily paranormal and not physical experiences. While you might have seen a UFO, while you might have seen a physical being, the overwhelming majority of these UFO-related contact experiences, they were having paranormal and psychic experiences. Number 4, these experiences involve a manipulation of space-time. These experiences might be interdimensional. Now, the first topic. We asked over 40 different questions to get at the issue of whether these experiences were positive, negative, or neutral. And the following is just a few examples. How would you describe your experiences? Positive, negative, or neutral? Well, 66% said overall it was positive. Only 5% said that it was negative, and 29% said that it was neutral. In terms of the types of physical beings that people saw, we asked the question of the type of beings that they saw. And as you could see all the way on the red, in terms of the percent that was negative, the overwhelming of these experiences were not negative. The number one type of being was the energy being. Number two was the human looking being. And number three was the spirit and ghost form. And I would argue that the 3 out of the 4 major types of beings seen are also the type of beings that people are seeing in near-death experiences. And as you can see, these are very large numbers. For example, the energy being was 1,305. The human-looking being was 1,195. The ghosts and spirits was 1,069. The short grays was 1,179. Now, we asked also the question, if you could stop your ET, non-human intelligence contact experiences, would you? Well, 84% said no. Keep it coming, baby, keep it coming. Did you believe that your ET, non-human intelligence experiences were bad, experiences are bad, malevolent, or evil? No, 91% said that these entities were not bad, malevolent, or evil. Now, the contact resulted in a positive transformation of the experiencer. We borrowed over 70 questions from Dr. Kenneth Ring's research study, which is a statistical research study, which he published in the Omega Project, Near-Death Experiences, UFO Encounters, The Mind at Large. And I believe it was 1992 that he published that book. And so I spoke with Dr. Kenneth Ring, and he allowed us to use 70 of his questions. In his study, he had 85 people that had UFO abduction type of experiences, and he compared it with 85 people that had near-death experiences. And what he found out was that approximately 75 to 85% of these experiences were answered the same exact way, no matter whether they were UFO related or NDE related. They had the same exact outcome in terms of how they were transformed. And depending on the question, it was between 75 to 85% had a positive transformation to that particular question. So let's go over some of these questions, okay? How did ET contact change your life? Okay, so 51% said it was highly positive effect on changing their life. 22% said it was a slightly positive effect. 17% said it was neutral. 6% it was slightly negative effect in changing their life. 4% said it was highly negative effect on changing their life. And this was consistent with Dr. Ring's research findings. Overall, depending on the question asked, as I said earlier, between 73 to 85% said that these experiences had a profound psychological and worldview profile change for them that was positive. And let's just go over a couple of these questions. This was all strongly increased or increased somewhat. My desire to help others, my compassion for others, my appreciation of the ordinary things of life, my sensitivity to the sufferings of others, my concern with spiritual matters. This is important for this group. It was 60% that it was strongly increased, and 23% was increased somewhat. My desire to achieve a higher consciousness, my appreciation of nature, my spiritual feelings, again, 83% said it was strongly increased. My concern for the welfare of the planet, my understanding of what life is all about, et cetera, et cetera. These are huge changes for strongly increased. Now let's look at the opposite. What decreased? Okay. Number one, my concern with material things. All of a sudden, there's no need to buy a new Mercedes-Benz every year. Okay. You can deal with the old Honda Accord. My interest in organized religion, again, strongly decreased. My competitive tendencies, my fear of death, just like NDE experiencers. All of a sudden, you have 73% said that their fear of death strongly decreased, okay? My desire to become a well-known person, become famous. So again, similar data to the data of Dr. Kenneth Ring, okay? Now, second major finding, the UAP contact experiencers have had primarily paranormal and not physical contact experiences. So let's look at some of that data. Have you ever had an out-of-body experiences? As you can see on the right, the responses for yes and no. As you can see, out-of-body experiences were 80%. Near-death experiences, very important for this group, 37%. Huge numbers. 37% had near-death experiences. Medical healings, again, very common for NDE contact experiencers. Okay, 50% had a medical healing by themselves or a member of their families. Did you experience involve some type of telepathic communication? 78%. Again, just like NDE and OBE contact experience, how does communication take place? telepathic communications. Okay. Were you brought to a matrix reality? 50% said yes. Now, NDEs and OBEs, by definition, is being brought to another multidimensional reality. So here, the UFO contact experiencers have had the same exact experiences. Have you ever had a past life memory recall? 66%. Have you seen a ghost or a spirit? Huge numbers, 76%. Very similar to NDE contact experiences. If you talk to NDE experiencers, many of them will tell you that after their NDE, they saw ghosts or spirits. And some of the people on this group call are in that category, okay? Have you memories of visiting or receiving a glimpse of heaven, or what can be called the spirit world? Well, 46%. So that cannot account for all of the NDE experiencers, because that's only 37%. Many of the people that have had UFO-related contact were brought to other realities and were taught about heaven and the spirit world. So again, almost 50% of these people. Have they seen orbs? 67%. Objects mysteriously appear and disappear, called apports, 25%. Objects ever fallen or suddenly move around the house, 61%. Can see or feel energy auras around people, 74%. Again, that's another common trait of NDE contact experiencers. People are nodding their heads because this is not just UFO contact experiences, it's also NDE and OBE contact experiencers and people that have seen ghosts and spirits. Okay, other type of paranormal experiences. Ghosts or spirits, 76%. Past life memory, 67%. They've seen their body out in space, leaving the planet, 49%. So it's not just you NDE experiencers, okay, or OB experiencers, also UFO contact experiences, the same thing. 47% have met or conversed with a deceased person, commonly called a ghost. 45% have memories of visiting what is commonly called the spirit world. 29% have channeled non-human intelligence. Anyway, let me skip over this category. Now, information received by non-human intelligence. Did you receive any type of communication from a non-human intelligence? 80% said yes. Was the communication in your native language? 75% said yes. So again, NDE folks, don't think it's just you, okay? UFO contact experiences have also had telepathic communication in their native language, 75%. Impart reassuring messages to you, 61%. Provide you with a spiritual message, i.e. NDE experiencers, you're not the only game in town, brothers and sisters. 54% said yes. Give a message of love and oneness. Again, NDE folks, you're not the only game in town. 54% of UFO contact experiencers have been given a message of love and oneness. Express to you concerns about humanity's behavior, 45%. On and on I could go with some of these, about God, messages about God or a creator, 31%, okay? So let's skip to some of these other questions. Questions about death process, about the afterlife, the spirit world, 30%. Let me see, about physical death in the spirit world, mission here on Earth, science-related topics, reincarnation, okay? 26% were given a message about reincarnation, how it works, okay? I don't know about you, NDE contact experiencers, I don't think so, but at least with the UFO contact experience, there's a heavy message on science and physics, downloads, heavy message. So let's go on. Physical experiences, I'll skip over this, the abduction related type of stuff, because that's not too pertinent. But basically what we discovered was that only a third of these individuals have had what is called an abduction experience, okay? That means being, have you ever had contact, but that you have no conscious recollection of ever being abducted, which is defined as being taken against your will to another location. The other third have had. But an interesting finding is that over time, their perception of their experience changed. Initially, a lot of folks were very, very frightened of their experiences. But then when you looked at them already as a mature adult, when they're answering the surveys, they had a tremendous transformation. Initially, 18% viewed their experience as an abduction of the most negative kind. Towards the very end, that was reduced to 8%. In terms of individuals that viewed their experiences, that they are indeed a conscious contactee, an egalitarian, an equal relationship, or being treated with respect and understanding, okay? That jumped all the way to almost 76% of people that view themselves as conscious contactees. Huge transformation. How many times people have had these abduction type of contact with non-human intelligence? The overwhelming number have had more than 20 type of experiences, 40%. And then this is a distribution of their experiences. What we found that the individuals that only had one or maybe two type of contact experiences with UFO related intelligence were the most negative. This bar chart will show you the more contact you had, the more was your viewpoint that these experiences were positive, okay? Again, as I said earlier, only 1/3 of these people have had abduction experiences. But again, of those that have stated that they've had an abduction experiences, 71% now call themselves contactees and not abductees. Now, contact and relocation to a matrix reality, and this will be a common theme among near-death experiencers and OBE experiencers. Also, people have had hallucinogenic journeys, mystical meditation, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, 749 of UFO-related contact experiencers have had contact with a non-human intelligence in an OBE-like reality, a reality with no boundaries, what can be considered a multi-dimensional or a matrix reality. And this happened to me while I was driving my car, okay? And I was taken outside of time, but yet I was in that experience like at least 25 minutes. But yet when I got back, I was still in the middle of a traffic jam. So I was literally taken outside of space and time. Now, were you physically present in your body? 61% said. Now, here's some contradiction here, because it's difficult to quantify these experiences. You perceive it as being physically in your body, just like an NDE. But in the sense, when you had your NDE, you might have seen your body underneath you. So you really weren't in your body, but yet you feel like you're in your body. So some of these questions might seem contradictory. And I'm sure that Yvonne and some of the other researchers in this group would certainly understand this. Were you physically present in your body? 61%. Was your consciousness separated from your body? 67%. Did your thoughts speed up? 57%. Were your senses more vivid than usual? 76%. Did you feel separated from your body? 53%. Again, very similar to NDE experiencers and OBE experiencers, okay? Almost the same, okay? Did you have a feeling of peace or pleasantness? 73%. Did you see or feel surrounded by a brilliant light? 52%. Now remember, 37% of these people had an NDEs. So these experiences cannot be just explained by people that had solely an NDE. These are in the experiences independent of NDE experiences. Like my case, I never had a formal NDE, but yet I had all of this. Did you encounter a mystical being, a presence, or hear a voice? 79%. Did you see a deceased or religious spirit? 37%. Did scenes from your past come back to you? 27%, 26%. Just, like a life review, very, very common. I don't know the actual data statistics of life reviews among NDE experiencers, but I think it's at least a quarter. So we got very similar data here. Did you seem to encounter some other earthly world? 70%. Did time seem to speed up or slow down? 76%. Did you feel a sense of, like my father, when he came back from his NDE, he said he was up there for 20 or 30 years. And I was like, what? What are you talking about, 20 or 30 years? He says, that's how long it took God to show me all the good things I had done in my life and all the bad things. So again, did time seem to speed up or slow down? Very, very common. So NDE experiencers, don't think you're the only game in town here, okay? Did you feel or sense a harmony or unity within the universe? Look at that, 69%. That's a very common theme among NDE experiencers and OBE experiencers and mystical meditators, etc. Did you suddenly seem to understand everything? Again, very common with OBE experiencers, NDE experiencers. Now, 59% of UFO contact experience said, I suddenly seemed to understand everything, but all of a sudden, it was taken away. Very common. Did scenes from the future come to you? 41%. Did scenes from the past come to you? 31%. Did the reality of the multi-dimensional experience seem real to you? 83%. Now, if you would ask that question to NDE experiencers, wouldn't you probably get the same type of result, okay? Did you perceive that time did not exist? 71%. So you see, UFO-related contact experiences were having almost the exact type of of multi-dimensional type of experiences as NDE and OBE type of experiences. And as you saw with all the paranormal, you saw all the similarities there as well. Now, spirituality and spirit world experiences, okay? 97% believe that non-human intelligence can travel to other dimensions. 91% believe that there is some sort of a grand plan in motion and experiences are all part of. 89% believe that there is a connection between non-human intelligence and the paranormal. Almost 83% believe that there is a connection between non-human intelligence and the spirit world. Again, I harp on this over and over again. NDE experiences and OBE experiences, you're not the only game in town. Look at this data, okay? You see the similarities? 82% believe that non-human intelligence can travel to the past and the future. 75% said that there is a connection between non-human intelligence and reincarnation. 45% have reached an agreement with non-human intelligence. 38% believe that non-human intelligence can be considered modern angels. And that's the way I like to deal with this. You know, that's my category. I know it's much more complex than that, but I'm interacting with the universal mind, you know, and modern angels. 30% agreed to be taken aboard a UFO craft. Okay, now this is what the earlier was what they believed. Now this is what actual non-human intelligence told them. And this is very important for this lecture, okay? 31% were given a message about God. Huge number, 31%. 30% were told by the non-human intelligent beings about the death process and the spirit world. If I had $1 for every person that has had UFO-related contact that has told me this, I would have my pockets full and I would be able to do grocery shopping for a whole week, okay? 28% said that non-human intelligence told them where they were from. 26% said that they were given a message about reincarnation. 25% were told about their mission here on Earth. 25% were shown how to do energy work. Again, if I had $1 for every UFO-related contact experiences that told me that they're now Reiki healers, I'm sure it's the same numbers for NDE contact experiencers. I'm sure half the people in this group here are into Reiki healing, or at least know what it is, or have tried it, okay? Very large numbers. It's a very common outcome from this phenomenon, okay? Now, here's an interesting part here. 25% were told by non-human intelligence that they at one time were a non-human intelligence, okay? Past lives, 24% were told about their past lives. Now, let me, this is Dr. Jacques Vallée. Jacques Vallée is probably the world's preeminent researcher on the topic of UFO. And many, many years ago, he titled the book titled UFOs, The Psychic Solution, UFO Influences on the Human Race. And let me see if this audio pops up.
I don't think we can hear it, Ray.
Oh,
I'm not hearing anything.
okay, let me get rid of that. But basically, I had that, I worked on my end. I can hear it on my end. I need to figure out how we can get the audio working on your end. But anyway, basically, Dr. Vallée's hypothesis is that these are not just little green men coming from Venus or Mars, that this is something much, much more complicated involving consciousness and how we as humans interact with consciousness. That's his hypothesis. And that we need to move away from the materialist aspect of what is circulating in ufology towards a more post-materialist perception of reality. Now, he wrote, Dr. Jacques Vallée wrote the foreword to this book titled The Simulation Hypotheses. And to the foreword, he wrote, the simulation hypotheses presents a radical alternative to current models of reality. Many fields rejected or neglected by modern science, such as religious visions, NDEs, psychic phenomenon, and even UFOs, can be brought under this framework. The result is a stunning reappraisal of what it means to be human in an infinite universe. Now, again, this is coming from one of the fathers of remote viewing, one of the individuals that invented the modern internet, and one of the individuals that has been researching the topic of ufology, UFOs, since the early 1960s, I would say. And again, he has a PhD in astronomy, well versed in physics, and computer modeling. So that's Dr. Jacques Vallée. Now, Dr. John Mack was a professor at the Harvard Medical School. And he was one of the first academics to come out publicly about his interest in studying UFO contact experiencers. And in 1999, he published this book titled Passport to the Cosmos, Human Transformation and Alien Encounters. And Dr. John Mack was ostracized by Harvard University. They wanted to kick him out of his tenure position. And one of the few individuals that came to support him and gave a talk to his Inquisition committee was Dr. Rudy Shields, who is a member of both the Free Foundation and the CCRI Foundation, the Harvard astrophysicist. And in his book, John stated, quote, "People know their experiences and what they have undergone does not fit within the prevailing mechanistic worldview, i.e. materialistic science. Large percentages of the people seem to know there is an unseen world or hidden dimensions of reality." Now, unfortunately, Dr. John Mack was killed in an automobile accident shortly after he published his book. If not, we would have made major strides to reorient our focus of the contact modalities more in line to the works of Dr. John Mack. Now, most of you know who Dr. Jeffrey Long is. Dr. Jeffrey Long, I consider one of the world's leading researchers on near-death experiences. And I've got a little time. Let me tell you a little trick. When I went out to interview Jeffrey out in Houma, Louisiana, where he lives, talking to Raymond Moody and also Kenneth Ring, both of them had a total disdain for the field of UFO because they always saw this field as people with little tinfoil hats. It was a totally discredited field, and I supported that. I think most of the field of ufology should be totally discredited because there's very little science and academia in that field. And so after I went into Alabama to interview Raymond Moody in my numerous discussions with Kenneth Ring, I said, okay, I'm going to take a different spin when I talk to Jeffrey Long because we wanted to interview him for a documentary that we are filming. So the first half hour, I was asking questions to Jeffrey, which came directly from our book. Okay. Now, if you didn't know what the hell our book was all about, you would think this was NDE related questions, right? And so I pulled the trick on him. I asked him all these questions for a book, and for a half hour later, I said, Jeffrey, do you realize that all these questions came from this book? And I showed him the cover, and he read it. He goes, "Oh my God, Ray, I thought those were NDE related questions." I said, "No, these were UFO related questions." He goes, "My goodness, I had no idea how interrelated they were." So then we took almost an hour off camera just for me to educate him in terms of our research study and the lecture that I just gave you, about the interrelationships. So at the end of that, Jeffrey goes to me and he whispered to my ear. He goes, "Ray, would it be possible to join you guys in our research study?" And so now Jeffrey is the co-chair of the CCRI Research Committee, together with Dr. Rudy Shields, a professor of astrophysics, and a couple of other PhD academics. So at least the NDE side is very well represented in our future research. Now, since the audio didn't work for Dr. Jeffrey Long, I'm assuming the audio didn't work for Jeffrey, but let me try one more time.
Yeah, somebody said you're supposed to share your audio on your screen. I'm really not quite sure how to do that.
Okay, let me try to go back here. Hold on a second. Let me try to go back here. If you don't mind, we got a little time.
Yeah, I'm trying to find Brian McLaughlin. Brian, I'm going to unmute you. I've just unmuted you, Brian. Can you tell him how to do this, please?
Yeah, unfortunately, it gets a little complicated. So you have to unshare this. You have to unshare your screen.
Okay.
To share it again, and then you can share sound with the audience.
Share it again. And now I click on the PowerPoint again.
Click on the PowerPoint, and then when it says share screen, then you also share sound.
Okay, let me see where the sound is. Okay, I see the share. Now,
Yeah, share
where
sound.
in the world is the sound here? I see the share sound. Is this where it is here? Let me see. Test speaker.
No,
You don't see it here? Do you see my screen?
I do, but I don't see the,
Okay, let's thank you. Let me go
okay,
back to Jeffrey's audio. Excuse me, Jeffrey. A little bit about him here. Let me go to the share screen here.
Thank you, Brian, for trying.
Thank you. Let me see. I have my screen shared, right? I just need to go back to the slide.
Yes, we
Okay.
need to go back to the
I,
correct
I
slide.
apologize for that. I know Yvonne and I tested this thing out, but one thing I didn't test was the actual audio, so I apologize for that. Basically, Jeffrey mentioned what we all know, that we are all eternal spiritual beings, what the NDE literature tells us. But Jeffrey is also now a firm believer that we need to be able to study all of the contact modalities, all of the experiencers of the contact modalities, in order to have a better understanding of what is consciousness, what is the nature of our reality. Now, for those individuals that are interested more in the UFO aspect of my research, this is the cover of our book. It's available via Amazon. Now, again, we undertook this research study not because we are a ufology organization. No. In order to be able to compare and contrast UFO contact with NDEs, with OBEs, etc., we needed to get basic data on the UFO contact experience. And Dr. Kenneth Ring's study from 1992, the Omega Project, that statistical study was quite limited. It just focused on a few areas, a few components. So the UFO data from Dr. Kenneth Ring's Ring study was fairly limited. So if you really want to know, have a better understanding, I should say, of the UFO contact phenomenon, which is a phenomenon totally outside of what is circulating in the BS ufology field, okay? Because that's not reality, that's BS, okay? Read the data, which is based upon more than 4,000 UFO contact experiencers, and the data was developed by numerous PhD academics. Now, let me continue here. These are some of the similarities. Now we're getting to some of the meat of it here between NDEs and UFO contact experiences. As I described earlier, telepathic communications. You never see in an NDE someone flapping their gums and talking, and I can't hear you, speak a little louder. No, you never hear that. Same thing with UFO contact and communications. Everything is telepathic. One of the primary characteristics is that both groups have had an out-of-body experience. Not all NDE experiencers and not all UFO contact experiencers, but the OBE component, like I said before, 80% of the people that took our survey had an OBE. Also, energy beings and spirit beings and human-looking beings. Those are 3 out of the 4 major types of quote-unquote beings that people are seeing, and those 3 beings are also 3 of the major types of beings, I would say, in an NDE experience. Medical healings. Medical healings, 50% of the people say that they had a medical healing in our survey. Well, guess what? NDEs also have tons of medical healings. I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves, the medical healing aspect of it. But Anita Moorjani is sort of like the spokesperson of the medical healing aspect of NDEs, but there are literally hundreds of people now on YouTube talking about their medical healings from NDEs. Reincarnation is another component that doesn't get its due from the NDE literature, but yet tons of people that have had NDEs talk about the reincarnation aspect of it. And that was a major topic in our study as well. Visions of the future. For the UFO studies, basically ecological visions. Visions of the past. For the NDEs, it's called a life review. But in our study, we've had both visions of the future and visions of the past. Dr. Kenneth Ring's book alluded to the total personality transformation. Same thing with us. Taken to a matrix reality. I just discussed that in detail. Precognition. Again, like Yvonne and I were talking, if we had $1 for every NDE experiencer that returned back with precognition skills, okay, we would have our pockets full of change. Same thing with UFO contact experiencers. It seems like it's almost a given. If you've had direct UFO contact experiences, you're going to have enhanced precognition skills. My wife is a classic case. I won't go into the details, maybe in the question and answers, but she was like, she detected a tumor in my back. Okay. Here's my wife, a non-medical person, said, you got a tumor in the back. It's a big one. You need to go to the doctor. I said, what the hell are you talking about? And she was hounding me and hounding me. Finally, I went to the doctor. The doctor determined I had a major tumor in my back, sent me to a surgeon. I had it operated on. It was like an 8-inch incision on my back. Seeing ghosts and spirits, again, very similar with NDE experiencers. They won't talk to you about it, okay, because the NDE stuff is crazy enough. But if you would ask NDE experiencers, you'll get a nice percent of these people that have also saw ghosts and spirits as deceased people after their NDE. And I'm sure Yvonne can attest to that. And also manipulation of electronic devices. I once heard saw a lecture by Dr. Bruce Grayson, one of the world's leading researchers on NDEs, okay? He talked about manipulation of electronic devices with NDE experiencers. Well, guess what? That was also another major component of UFO contact experiences. Almost 60% of the people talked about manipulation of electronic devices. Spiritual messages. I went over the details of the spiritual messages that we're giving. In terms of the macro issues, okay, the UFO contact phenomenon, as well as the NDEs and OBEs, etc., what they tell us is that consciousness is non-local. Okay. Number 2, that there is a manipulation of space-time taking place with the UFO contact phenomenon. Number 3, that we might be dealing with a multi-dimensional reality. And approximately 50% of the academics, which involve 3 PhD physicists in our group, believe that we're living in a virtual reality. And so again, it's these are mind-blowing comparisons between NDEs and UFO contact. Now, CCRI's new book is titled A Greater Reality, the New Paradigm of, now it's called Non-Local Consciousness, the Paranormal, and the Contact Modalities. We had to put in the term paranormal because folks would not understand what our book was all about. Now, we have 4 volumes. Each of them are going to be approximately 800 pages. We have 90 authors. 25 of these authors are PhD academic professors or retired PhD academic professors. We also have about 5 medical doctors that have written chapters for our authors. As authors. Volume 1 and 2 will be theoretical in nature, and they will present diverse hypotheses from these academics and medical doctors on the nature of our multi-dimensional reality and how that relates to contact with non-human intelligence. Volume 2 and 3 are going to be chapters by individual experiencers, okay? And this is the title of our book, as I've shown you before. Now, the experiencer chapters, almost all of them are going to be having chapters featuring individuals very similar to Yvonne. I mean, we're also going to be having several medical doctors that are experiencers. Let me just highlight Dr. Melinda Greer. Okay, Dr. Melinda Greer, she's going to be public, so it's I could talk about her now. She is 64 years old. She works in a medical hospital, a children's medical hospital in a Native American reservation. Okay, extremely bright individual. Yet you name it, she's had it. She's had 2 NDEs. Her second NDE occurred like 8 years ago, and it was absolutely mind-blowing. And her NDE supports the thesis that we're living in a virtual reality because all of who she was, Dr. Melinda Greer, was uploaded to like a central mainframe computer, you know, for lack of a better terms. I won't go into all those details, but she's had 12 UFO sightings, almost all of them very up close. She's had 2 out-of-body experiences. When she was young, over a 10-year period, she had all of these astral travels where she was shown different things, most of them dealing with the spirit world, okay? She's had 3 Sasquatch experiences, 2 of them very up close, okay? In terms of paranormal aspects of it, you name it, she has had it. Now, here's a woman saving the lives of very sick children in a medical hospital. in an emergency room in a children's hospital. So the woman is not freaking crazy. You know, she's totally sane, extremely mature, very intelligent, bright woman, yet she's having all these experiences. Well, we're going to have over 90 articles, excuse me, close to 60 articles by individuals just like Dr. Melinda Greer. Okay, some of them are physicists, some of them are professors, some of them are attorneys like I am, each of them telling you that they've had numerous diverse types of contact experiences, which goes back to the thesis, okay, that what we're dealing with is something that's interdimensional in nature, that we're exploring the relationship between consciousness, our cosmology, and contact with non-human intelligence via the contact modalities. Now, to reach me, my email is info@experiencer.org, info@experiencer.org. As I said before, send me an email and I will send you various chapters from our first book titled Beyond UFOs. Certainly all the data, not all the data, the most important aspect of our data research. Chapter 1, for example, is 120 pages in length. I will send that to you for free. I will also send you chapter 2, which is an analysis by Dr. John Climo of the qualitative data. That's over 200 pages. So if you're bored out of your wits, you have nothing to do, right there you have 350 pages to read about our research study. I will also send you information about our new book, A Greater Reality. And that also has the names of all the academics and medical doctors associated with this new organization. So once again, thank you very much. And
great. If you can stop the sharing, then Linda will lead us into the question and answer period. So
all within an hour, Yvonne.
Very well done. Thank you so much, Venerio. That was really, really fascinating. So Linda?
Yeah, Ray, you have sent us on a journey. Just wanted you to remind you, we have people attending from throughout this orbit, everything from Maine to Canada, Oregon, Canada, Florida, Romania, United Kingdom, Brazil, Laguna Niguel. So we've got quite an audience with us today.
Well, our research data came from individuals from over 125 countries. So this is not just US or European-centric type of experiences. These are happening all over the world, just like NDEs. They're not confined to a specific geographic region.
Okay, well, that sounds good. I'm going to take it right off the chat line. First one I have is from Kathy, and she says, Venerio, had you been on a spiritual journey before the initial contact in your living room, or was it completely unexpected?
It was completely unexpected. I had to attend Sunday Mass. I had to attend Thursday group prayer meetings. If not, there was no food for the rest of the week from my wife. And there would be fights all over the week. She had constantly called me an atheist, and I was a proud atheist. So I had zero knowledge of the paranormal. I was a total materialist. Mind you, I had gone to Cornell, to Berkeley for a PhD. My mindset was as a scientist. So it was a total transformation that began on March the 3rd, 2012.
Wow. Got a comment, not really a question, but I'm going to feed it into a question. That's from Sharon. She says, oh my God, this is so validating. I've been dismissed by so many because I didn't have photos. Yet my experience was incredibly positive and changed my life. And I just want to share that. As you went over the biographies of those 4 founders and those involved with the research, that was a convincer for me. This is very validating information.
Thank you.
Okay,
and
so
also,
the next...
just to address the issue of photos, folks just don't understand that this intelligence that we're interacting with, they will not allow you to take a picture. Here I was with my daughter and 3 friends watching this football stadium size object, this aerial display, light display, that was 30 feet away from me. All of us had cell phones except my daughter. You think any of us bothered to take a video or a picture? If we would have taken a picture of it, we would have been on the cover of Time magazine for the next 20 years, okay? No, there was, I don't like to use the word mind control, but it was your perception of the reality that you're interacting with is, they put like a shell around it, okay? It was only afterwards, okay, that after they got me to go inside, after I felt I was being attacked by hundreds of mosquitoes, I go inside. And my daughter, I'm telling my wife what happened outside, and we had to go inside because all these mosquitoes attacked me. My daughter goes, "Daddy, there were no mosquitoes outside," and it was like the hypnotist snapped his finger, and all of a sudden I woke up and I was fully conscious now. And I ran downstairs, grabbed my video camera, my professional camera. I ran outside, boom, there was nothing there. And that's when I realized, oh my goodness, whatever this intelligence is, it's able to go into your consciousness to be able to read and upload your information of what's there and to download whatever they want you to believe and to perceive. That's how complicated this is. And so that's why you don't see pictures of these things.
Okay. Got one here from Carolee. Now, this was an early question because I know later on in the presentation you covered it, but she did ask, do Bigfoot sightings also fit into these experiences?
Yes, we actually asked that question. We didn't use the word Bigfoot. We had a big, hairy animal-like type of being. And I forgot the exact numbers, but if I recall, it was approximately 12% of the people had encounters with that category. And then when we asked people to write out the details of their experiences, we actually had over 300 people that had what can be commonly described Bigfoot experiences, and they detailed, those experiences for us. And just like the medical doctor that I told you about, we actually went to the national park where she had her 2 Bigfoot encounters, and they were quite scary to her. So, I mean, it's, once you first hear these stories, you're like, is this woman crazy? Or is it real, But then when you hear all the intricacies of the details of her experience, not one, but twice, then you realize, my goodness, this is real. And then after reading all the hundreds of people that wrote about their own particular Bigfoot experiences, you realize that, yes, these are real. Now, whether we have answers for them, just like NDEs and OBEs and UFO contact, we have more questions than we have answers.
True. Rosemarie, she has asked, how can someone be a phenomena researcher or a researcher assistant? Do you have to have a PhD?
Oh, no. We had, for example, for the UFO, the first research study that we had roughly half of the folks were people that have been researching UFO contact experiences for over 30 years. There was about 8 of them. Excuse me. And so these were not PhDs. These are just normal people that they themselves had these experiences, and they wound up being researchers. And then for this study, we actually brought in, as part of our group, this man who studied to become a priest. And while in his priesthood, started doing poltergeist exorcisms with this older priest. And that got him involved into the whole aspect of the afterlife and ghosts and spirits and poltergeists and what he calls attachments, okay? So this man now is in his 70s, but I consider him one of the world's leading researchers on ghosts, spirits, poltergeists, and attachments. So he was brought into the group as a former researcher, but he's not a PhD, but yet he's just as smart as anyone here on this board, okay? And brilliant man, and that has a wealth of contribution. So no, you don't have to have a PhD.
Awesome. Okay, Lee has asked, if some could see future events, would you say the future is predetermined? How about free will?
Yes, I personally believe that free will exists, but with certain parameters. I always tell folks that ask me that question is that I personally believe and was given information that you're like in a play, okay? The final script is written, okay? Like any Shakespeare play, the final script is written, but you have the ability to ad lib. You have the ability to make mistakes. And that's where the life review comes in. How well you ad libbed, how well you learned from your mistakes, how well you changed, how well you learned how to love, how well you learned to be compassionate, Okay, so that's what I think, happens, that we're here on this temporary journey to ad lib and to make choices. So yes, free will exists, but when you have your life review, you'll see that, hey, I really had a long way to go to learn how to love. And so yes, free will does exist.
I want to share that, whenever you validate somebody's experience, that it brings them peace in life. And Sharon is sharing that with us also. She says, please hear my gratitude for this presentation. Finally, someone who says what I know. I am so happy. This integrated approach explains so much and indicates a path regarding what comes next.
Yes, most certainly. I'm a researcher. Why? Because I want to know what the hell happened to me. I didn't give you the full explanation of my experiences. If not, we would be here the entire day. But I want to. I always considered myself a rational, intelligent person. I basically had straight A's, for the last 8 years of my academic studying. And when I went into the internet and I would read all this UFO stuff, it was like, this is garbage. This is not telling me what's going on. And so I had to really find out for myself and to explore. And then I learned later on that this is not just about UFOs. This is all aspects of the paranormal. And so then I got to talk to some of the leading experts that were studying the relationship between consciousness and the paranormal. And most of these individuals were working as individuals. They're not working as a team. Okay. And yet some of them would get certain aspect of it, but they would not get the other aspect of it. And so I said to myself, my goodness, someone has to organize all these brilliant minds and get them working together, because all of them shared the same hypothesis, that consciousness is primary, that we might be living in a virtual reality, that all of this might explain or what is commonly called the paranormal, that they're all interrelated, and we need to research it and study it as one phenomenon. But no one was doing it. Okay, so Ray Hernandez, who's not a scientist, I decided, just like Yvonne did with this group, to undertake this task, to begin to study this complex phenomenon from an academic perspective, but again, grounded in the experiencer. This is not a PhD physicist talking about a mathematical equation that explains consciousness and contact. No, this is how do we begin to understand the experiencer, because they have the clue, they have the key to better understand this phenomenon. How do we understand these experiencers and then apply those lessons to this complicated phenomenon, which involves, quantum physics and advanced discussions of consciousness. So that's how I see my role.
Okay. I know I'm supposed to read the chat questions, but I have to share right now, I am full of goosebumps. The next one I'm sharing is from somebody I actually know. His name is Ben. He's a veteran, as I am. And he mentions the town where I was raised and my father was born and raised in. The question is this: why are the NHIBs, which is the non-human intelligent beings, visiting here? Is their visit to a family in Brockton, Mass, a clue? And I'm thinking this might be a prominent case that you know of. Do you know of one with a family in Brockton, Massachusetts?
I know that the researcher that studies ghosts and poltergeists, etc., he's based out of Boston. So if it's anything related to that topic area, he probably knows it or has heard about it. But in terms of my hypotheses, okay, because that's all this is hypotheses of why they're coming to interact with us. I think that's a very, very complicated question, and which deserves a very, very complicated response, which I'm not going to be able to do now. But I think is that what we're dealing with is we are dealing with, for lack of a better word, the universal mind. What Kenneth Ring's book, to the end of it, he talked about the universal mind. And he took that concept from Dr. Michael Grosso, who happens to be a co-editor of our new book, A Greater Reality. And that's goes back to, the Vedic tradition, the Buddhist tradition, of one mind and oneness, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what we are living in a virtual reality, and that this universal mind, okay, is then interacting with us. Now, some of that action might be if your deceased child just died. All of a sudden, you'll see what physically appears to be your deceased child interacting with you. So before your child goes into the Bardo state, the consciousness of that entity, okay, returns back to soothe you, you know. And so many people have had what is commonly called afterlife communications. So that's what I think that's all about, is that the greater mind is allowing or guiding its subdigit, because we are all subdigits of the universal mind. We're all aspects of the greater mind. We just happen to break off as a little piece to have these individualized journeys. And so that individualized subdigit aspect of consciousness is being allowed to return back to this physical reality to interact with folks for different reasons. But most of these reasons, I think, among all of the contact modalities, I think are to stimulate humanity, for them to begin to understand that they are universal intelligences, that they are eternal spiritual beings. And like Yvonne and I had a conversation the other day, and the question that I pose now to all the listeners here is, what would you argue would be the first major event where the whole aspect of UFOs, of ETs, of off-world planet types of beings, when did that really take off at an international level? I would argue with Star Trek, and that was in the early 70s. Okay, NDEs, when did that really take off? That was with Dr. Kenneth Ring's book, okay, Life After Life, which is 1975, okay? The OBE phenomenon, when did that really take off internationally? That would be with Robert Monroe's books, and that took place again in the early 70s. So here you have 3 out of the 4 major contact. And this is, again, before the internet, for those youngsters that are out there that don't understand the importance of the internet, because the internet is now able to circulate all this widely. This is before, when you had to read a physical book, you know, you had to get Time magazine or a physical magazine to read these things, okay? So why did 3 out of the 4 major contact modalities initiate within 5 years of each other? My argument would be that these were an awakening by the universal mind that, okay, little kids, now it's time to gradually transition for you to begin to understand that you are, you know, complex beings, that our reality is multidimensional in nature, and all of you need to become awakened, and then eventually to become more spiritual, to become more loving. But that is a much more latter transition that's going to be very, very difficult to take place. But at least I believe they're coming to us to awaken us as an individual level, not a societal level, individual level, to awaken us that we are eternal spiritual beings.
Okay, kind of reading ahead in the questions, and I think it just addressed the next one. It says, you said that NDEs, OBEs, UFOEs, etc., were all part of a broader phenomenon. Can you explain what the broader phenomenon is and how they're all related?
Okay, well, in my presentation, I described how all of these experiences are multidimensional in nature. They're occurring outside of our material reality. And that is a post-materialist explanation of our reality. It's not, you know, Isaac Newton, you know, Galileo, and Albert Einstein types of explanations, okay? This is dealing really with quantum physics aspect, if you want to talk about it at that angle, but also metaphysical aspects of our reality. And I think that the NDE literature has been fully evolved to that point where we're beginning to understand that the NDE and the OBE phenomenon is really multidimensional in nature. And so what we did in our research studies to also show that the UFO contact experiences are also multidimensional in nature. Now, in terms of possible explanations for the multiverse and theories and hypotheses, there are several explanations that are out there by PhD physicists. The most latest one, and the one that a lot of the scientists in our group are adhering to, is the virtual reality hypothesis. And again, and that's really not any different from someone that believes in God or religion. All you're doing is just eliminating the human-related dogma associated with that mindset. You know, there is this universal mind out there. The universal mind is all-knowing. The universal mind is all-controlling. But you're getting rid of, you know, the whole aspect, for example, of Christianity, that you're born as a sin. You know, Jesus Christ died because of their sin, and all these other human related type of dogma. I don't want to offend anyone, but I'm just trying to give it as an example that it's very similar to religion, except that you're eliminating the human related aspect of the nature of our reality. And again, this is a theory that was been circulating since the early Vedic tradition, like 3 or 4 or 5,000 years ago. Buddhism, the whole issue of the Dharma, they described the whole Dharma process. Ancient Greeks, and Romans, but particularly the Greeks, that's where this whole area of philosophy called philosophy of the mind. Well, where did that come about? Well, that became the ancient Greeks, and they were taught by the folks from India, because there was a lot of interchange between both of these groups. So these are not new concepts, okay? The whole issue of the virtual reality and the universal mind. This is just being able to add some science and mathematics and physics to these concepts.
Okay. For me, you're showing signs of precognition, because your answer, which included discussing virtual reality and multidimensional life, is really addressing the next question. But the question is, the second question from Swarna is, having read a number of these survey responses yourself, do you have a theory or some understanding on the nature of reality?
Well, if I could point out, my response to that always is that we don't even know what questions to ask, let alone what, having the answers. So anyone that comes to you and acts like they have all the answers, run away from them. The person is what's the term, a charlatan? So it's a snake oil salesman, okay? So run away from those people. Now, I do have my own personal opinion, my hypotheses, and I think the individual that best reflects my own personal hypotheses, that has been working on this for many, many years, which I recently discovered, is Dr. Tom Campbell. And he is a PhD physicist, and he was one of the people that Robert Monroe, in his early works on out-of-body experiences, referred to as the PhD academic, Tom C or something like that. So he was working with Robert Monroe since the early 70s to be able to understand out-of-body experiences. And so what he then took that, and he used his physics background to be able to then extrapolate on it. And what he managed to work on is a total comprehensive theory, which is a theory that, like my background says, all our reality is information-based. And most physicists talk about that. And also the theory that we're living in a multi-dimensional reality, and that we're living in a virtual reality. Now, what's fascinating about him is that he also incorporates aspects of NDEs without, I think, fully researching the NDE or understanding it. I might be not correct there, but he talks about this concept called entropy, how which is a physics term. And I was taught that in one of my lessons with higher level intelligence, which I won't go into the details of that, okay? But it involved entropy, and involved us needing to reduce entropy here in our physical reality. And part of it dealt with the need for humanity to become more spiritual, to become more loving, more caring. Now, Tom Campbell also wrote about that, which totally freaked me out, because here's a man that's talking about the same thing that I had in my personal experience, with conscious intelligence. Very, very specific, examples that were exactly the same. And so then I began to look more in terms of his writings and his research, and which he published in this trilogy, which is now available as one volume, also 820 pages, titled My Big Toe, My Theory of Everything, and which is absolutely brilliant. And I highly resonate with his theory, which is too complicated to be able to tell to the audience members. I would say go to YouTube, Google some of his lectures, some of his discussions on YouTube, and so you can begin to understand Tom Campbell. And once you begin to understand a little bit about his theories, then you begin to understand Ray Hernandez, the way I think.
Okay. Well, Tamara wants to know a little bit more about you, and she is asking, do you still have contact with the angelic-like alien beings in person or in dreams or astral travel? If so, what type of information are they disseminating to you?
No, no longer. It lasted from 2012 to about 2016. And it finally stopped once, I won't go into the details of it because it's quite complex, but I was interacting with an intelligence that me being a materialist, such a hardcore rationalist person. And finally, it sent me off on this experience that when I came back, I was like, my goodness, this is real. There's no way to deny this. This is very, very real. And it was the major final realization that I need to take this serious and for real. And after that experience, my experience has stopped. It was like, okay, the kid is ready. He's gotten his spirituality via the NDE literature and experiences. We finally jolted him to be able to accept that these experiences are very, very real. And once he fully understood that, then they stopped. And they allowed me to do the work that I'm doing now. It was like a preparation. That's the only other way. And it was all orchestrated. All of my experiences were all orchestrated. It was like a little puppet. Someone on the top was manipulating the puppet. That's exactly how how my experiences evolved. But to answer that question, no, they stopped in 2016.
Yeah, they woke you up. Okay, so Deborah's asking us, would you elaborate on the theory we are living in a virtual reality? This has been on my mind for years. Which reference that you mentioned do you recommend I read?
Yeah, again, I would recommend folks to go to YouTube and type in Tom Campbell, okay? And also virtual reality. I know that he has a couple of lectures that are specific to the virtual reality hypothesis. Now, don't give up on him because this is quite complicated. It's not easy to understand, okay? And also he's a very, very like Yvonne, a very detail-oriented person. Like everything is, all the details have to follow each other. So you might lose, his concepts, his ideas, because he's very much detail-oriented. But I would suggest to stick with it, okay? To listen to these YouTube videos over and over again. I think, in my humble opinion, it gives the best presentation of the nature of our reality.
Okay. This is from Greetings. Have you studied Revelations? And this is not a biblical question. This is a sample, meeting a human in actual time on a street in San Francisco and having a transformative mystical encounter.
Oh, yes. Yes. I don't want to give some of the details of these experiences, but yes, very, very, very much so. These are meeting a particular individual that I had been interacting with. And this particular individual, let me see, how do I put this properly? Most of my most weirdest and most profound experiences came through this particular individual. And yes, it was a profound awakening.
Okay. Deborah wants to ask, and I think you said at the beginning there were 3 separate surveys, and she asked, how many people were part of these surveys?
Yes, that was one of my initial slides. The first survey was 4,000, almost 4,200 individuals from over 125 countries. I believe phase 2 was about 1,500 or so. No, that was for phase 3. I would have to go back to phase 2, but overall, phase 1 was 4,200 individuals.
I kind of remember, I think it was the 4,000 and then about 2,500 and then about 1,800.
Yeah.
Because I remember those numbers right.
Correct. What happened was that people began to complain how lengthy our surveys were and the length of time that it took to complete them. And so for the third one, people were like, look, I'm sorry, Ray, but I ain't going to answer 70 questions. I don't have the time for that. All these things serve as triggering responses for me. I'm reliving all my experiences again. And plus it would take me forever to write out in writing written responses to the open-ended questions. So God bless those 1,200 people that did phase 3 and poor Dr. John Klimo, because he had the misfortune of having to read over 10,000 pages. Uh, and then he eventually did write 200 pages, which is it took him 9 months to do it. It was a huge task. But again, we're not talking about a few people here. We're talking about thousands and thousands of people from all over the world.
Okay. Looking for outreach here. Kent would like to know if you've ever met Mark Sims and the Harmonic Convergence 2020 organization.
Well, there are literally hundreds of individuals that have their own separate UFO related organizations out there. I've heard of his name. I've never spoken about him, and I don't put anyone in the platform because the overwhelming majority of people that are out there, let me see, how should I put this in a diplomatic way? I think they're missing the boat on many topics. Why? Because I've been researching this with all of these academics and researchers for many years. We had the actual data, so I was getting the actual information directly from experiencers. And so, and now we're doing this much more bigger picture. So my perspective is much more larger than just UFOs. And again, we're still trying to understand the complexities of this. And that's why the new organization, CCRI, is developing a 5-year academic research study on all of the experiencers, because we want to be able to get all the data, not just for the UFO people, but also for NDE folks, for OBE folks, for hallucinogenic journeys, mystical meditation, etc. And we want to be able to ask the same questions to all of these people, because right now that data doesn't exist. No one has ever done this before. Okay. So I think we'll get some fascinating responses if we ask the same questions to all of these groups. Like, for example, the huge mailing list of IONS. If I'm able to get the IONS mailing list, send it out to all the IONS folks, to the people that deal with OBEs, if I can get their mailing list and send it out, or they can send it out, you know, to all of these people that have had, you know, out-of-body experiences, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have 2 PhD statisticians in our organization. And so they're going to be helping us to crunch out the data, crunch out the numbers. And then we've got all these other academics and non-academics, like I told you before about that man that was a Catholic priest. So we'll then be reviewing the data and then be able to come up with possible hypotheses. Now, before, we're going to be coming up with questions in our research methods, which are going to be testing hypotheses. So for those that are involved in research methodology, you know what I'm talking about. For example, if you want to test out this concept, for example, that the afterlife exists, you know, and is there commonality to the afterlife? So you would put in there 100 questions related to the afterlife. So that's related, testing that hypothesis. You know, is there an afterlife? That's just an example.
Well, Ray, I think what I just heard you say is, I understood there's been 3 surveys already done, but there's more research to come. And so we've passed our 30 minutes for questions, and this might be a good point to transition, or we could continue if you got the time.
Let me just address that last question.
Well,
the new survey is going to be based upon the new organization, which is the bigger picture of all the contact modalities. The first one mainly focused on UFO contact experiencers. So this next survey that we're going to be doing is all the experiencers of the contact modalities.
okay, so the question was, where and how can I get involved in research as a subject? People want to know.
Okay, send me an email, info@experiencer.org.
Okay, you know, that might be a good point to transition into a closing. It's been a phenomenal, you know, I remember the first time I picked up Ken Ring's book and I got to page 2 and I wanted to put it down. I thought it's crazy and I finished it, but you just validated his book is on, and we've got a lot more to know about life. I sure appreciate it. At this point, I'm going to turn this question and answer over to John, and we'll give John some airtime.
Hi. I like to, you know, my initial thing I want to say is what a great presentation that was. It was broad and it was deep, and it makes me want to throw away the 60 or so UFO books that I have in my library.
Yes, throw them away. That's what I did.
That I've read, you know, because your perspective on the whole topic is fresh and it's new. And so I will probably read more UFO books as soon as I get a hold of yours. So I'll be back into that topic. I haven't really read about UFOs in a long time. It's mostly NDEs, but what a wonderful presentation. And you're obviously, you know, one of the leading experts on the topic. So I really appreciate. So I'm director of South Bay Ions and South Bay chapter of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And Chuck Rader, who is on the screen here, is our associate director. We're transitioning to Chuck. We have our meetings in Saratoga, California, when we have meetings. Of course, right now we're not, but we're taking this time to transition and looking forward to hosting more in-person meetings. But if you want to look at our website, it's SB for South Bay, IANDS for ions.org. And so that we have 11 years of history on that website of all the speakers that we've had. And we normally have one meeting a month. So there's a lot of history on that website, and you can kind of see what we're all about. I'm very proud to have been asked by Yvonne, Linda, and Robert to help co-host this meeting. And, you know, we represent Chuck and I are representing our group. And we really appreciate being able to co-host it. We all have the same mission. SAI is SAI, IONS is IONS, but we all have the same mission, and that's to help experiencers of all types, especially SAI deals with all the different STEs, to continue their healing process. We feel that, as Ray has made so plain in his talk today, that we're being spoken to by the universe, and we want to absorb every part of our experience in a way that makes us more aware beings. So I really appreciate that wonderful talk. Right now, I'd like to introduce Chuck Rader, who's the new director of South Bay Ions. And he's got a couple things to say, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, John. A couple of things. First off, I see a lot of current members of South Bay Ions who have joined today's presentation. I'm very heartened to see that you were able to join, as well as a number of alumni. I saw Brian Sackett's name pop up. I know Brian's now up in the Toronto area. And so a shout out to Brian for all the great work that he has done in the past with South Bay Ions. And I'm sure he's continuing to do great work up in Ontario. A couple of things to basically to follow up on John's comments. We do hope to have in-person meetings start. I think everybody's aware we're still trying to get through the vaccination program here down in the States. I know Canada is also working very hard on this. We still have the question about the variants. Hopefully we'll get all this sorted out through late spring and into summer. And my hope is that we can resume in-person meetings, hopefully sometime in the upcoming fall. So stay tuned. John and I will be working on this, and we hope to get in-person meetings as soon as it's possible. So again, stay tuned on that. The one thing also I'd like to just close with is I've been able to participate in the SAI program since the very beginning. I think we're now in 9 months. And I just have to say to Yvonne, Robert, and Linda, this is a magnificent organization that you folks have put together. And I'm just in constant awe about how you've been able to build an organization so wonderful as this in such a short period of time. As Yvonne pointed out, we have folks from 55 countries who are now part of the program. I know it spans across Canada, the United States. I saw a couple of names pop up from Brazil. We have a number of people from all throughout Europe and also from down in Australia. So it truly is an international organization. Every time, and I think I've only missed one of the in-person, or I should say online Zoom meetings since they started last summer. Every single one of the presentations I have thought has absolutely hit it out of the ballpark. And Ray, today your presentation was just a perfect fall onto that perfect record of wonderful presentations, very eye-opening, always challenging. And so I just have to say my hats off to you, Yvonne, Robert, and Linda. You're doing a magnificent job. Keep it up. It's going to continue to grow with all the wonderful work that you're putting into the organization. So again, tremendous job. What more can I say? I love this organization as I love IONS. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn over the floor to Robert Baer. I think, Robert, you might have a few final comments.
I do. I want to say one thing. The first time I met Ray, I couldn't sleep for 2 days. I probably won't be able to sleep for 2 days after this presentation. You really hit home to me with what you've talked about. And he mentioned Dr. Jeffrey Long. Dr. Jeffrey Long spoke here at SAI a couple months ago. If you go to our website, you can see his presentation. It's absolutely phenomenal. And I think it would enhance what you heard today. I want to also thank John Spar, who, by the way, is on our advisory board, the SAI advisory board. He's a member. Chuck and South Bay IONS for hosting or for co-sponsoring this event. And SAI does have a presentation scheduled usually the third Saturday of each month. Next month, we're going to have a special presentation. It's going to be Saturday, May 15th with Dr. Richard Kelly, and it's for our first responders military program that we have, which is led by our secretary, Linda Truax. And I hope that you'll tune in for that. He's a phenomenal speaker. I've heard him speak before. If you know anybody that's been in the military that has PTSD, or I'm a retired policeman, I can relate to everything he says. It's really worth the time and the effort to sit through it. He's phenomenal. Also, June 12th and the 13th will be our first SAI conference. And I can't believe it's almost been a year at that time that we'll be in existence. And we have a dynamite conference put together. And Dr. Yvonne Cason has spearheaded this and done just a phenomenal job. But we have speakers from 22 countries. We have all different types of people that are noted in this field. We have Dr. Bruce Grayson, who was mentioned today, Dr. Yvonne Cason, Dr. Francis Liu, who attends most of our presentations, Jyote Ma, Bill Guggenheim, and Kimberly Clark Sharp. And I'm mentioning those primarily because they are part of our Circle of Honor members. They have tremendous input into what's happened all these years, and they've stuck their neck out all these years. The same as Ray. Ray's done the same thing. Also, we're going to be introducing our new Spanish language panel. For those of you involved in the Espanol world, I think you'll really, really enjoy it. And we're going to have our first NDE Talking Dead panel. It'll be an international panel. There'll be three people that will be part of the panel that are all near-death experiencers that have actually passed and came back to life. One from England, one from Canada, and one from the United States. And our moderator, Tamara Calder Richardson, is also a 6-time experiencer. So we are looking forward to starting that. And it's going to be a phenomenal conference. It's free, www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. sign up. And I just want to mention one thing. What sets SAI apart from others, we are experiencers and we have built this organization. We have founded it for experiencers of all types of NDEs and STEs. We have no dogma. And we are here to help you. We have some presentations that I think will interest anybody with just a wide variety of topics. And I'm going to turn the closing remarks over to the co-founder, Dr. Yvonne Cason. Thank you for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. I also want to thank everyone for coming. And those of you who have not yet subscribed to be on our Spiritual Awakenings International mailing list, please do go on our website and subscribe so you'll be on our mailing list. The website again is www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. So several people have asked about the videos. Yes, this was live streamed on Facebook. So if you go to the Spiritual Awakenings International Facebook page, the recording will be there immediately after this session. We will also be polishing up the video and posting it on our SAI website, and that'll be up in about 2 or 3 days. So thank you everyone for coming. And thank you, Ray. Your talk was absolutely phenomenal. And so on behalf of everyone, I'd like to say goodbye. See you May 15th for our next event. Goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen, adios, buenos tardes, arrivederci,
Que te vaya bien.
Dag, farewell, and ciao.
Thank you, Ray.
Ciao.